Good afternoon. Frank Buckholtz from the Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce, North Langley Community Director, and this is part of our Resilience series where we're talking to people in the local business community about COVID-19, how it's affected their business, how they have come through it, and the challenges they've had to deal with. And with me today is Rhonda Driediger of Driediger Farms. Welcome, Rhonda.
Thank you.
And we're just going to adjust it back a bit so I think we're both in there properly. I think that looks good. And I've prepared some questions for you that you've had a chance to go over. And first off, tell us about your business. What does your business do?
Okay, what most people know us for is our on-farm market on 72nd Avenue, and we grow and sell strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, red currants, some other products there. But the majority, that's actually just a very small part of what we do, and the majority of what we do is here in this location, and we buy from other farms, and we pack predominantly blueberries, fresh and frozen, and ship those throughout North America and Asia.
Okay. And you have been through 2 years of COVID like everyone else in the business community, but in the farming business and agriculture, there's some unique aspects of it. And one of the things that has been unique is you were saying that you've had a lot of demand for your product, especially in the earliest days of COVID.
True. We, everyone has to eat, and the interesting thing when you're in a crisis, things become much more focused. And so, as we saw, there was some hoarding going on, and people, like you mentioned, focusing on hoarding toilet paper, but we know you can live without toilet paper. But you can't live without food and water. And so being in the food business is actually a very good business to be in during a crisis. It's worked out well for us. I mean, there's a lot of challenges. But, and I think we'll go over some of those challenges, but, you've got challenges with labor, you have challenges with keeping people safe and keeping them healthy, and then also being able to provide products to people.
Yeah, and you had mentioned earlier that people were really anxious to get fresh produce, and you had lineups, partly because of the COVID rules and the concern, but they were also anxious because they weren't sure about whether it wasn't safe.
Well, that's just it. People, this caused so much anxiety for people, and when you go into it, and what we found is that people preferred to be shopping from people that they knew, or companies that they knew, and as few stops as possible, to not just to eliminate contact, but I think again part of that anxiety, part of that a little bit of fear that if I can just get just what I need and in the smallest amount of stops possible. Some people didn't seem to be affected at all, but people that we saw were just very happy. We're close to the urban center of Langley, and we offered no contact pickup. You could shop online, and then when we did open for berries, that people were able to just take a number and stay in their vehicles, stay outside in the fresh air, and then it was their turn. They would come in and grab what they needed or purchase what they needed and head home. So I think that really helped a lot. And most of my friendly competitors and I offered the same, very similar experiences for people. And then we talked about the U-Pick as well. And that was an interesting thing, because we weren't sure if could we even offer U-Pick? But it did well. We were concerned that maybe the numbers would be down, but the numbers were about the same, maybe slightly higher, because it was a chance for people to get outdoors and get out where there was a little bit of freedom in relative safety.
Yeah.
So that worked out really well, considering, in February, March, we weren't sure if we were even going to be open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So that was a very interesting time, that May, June, July 2020. And of course, another thing I think sometimes we don't always remember when we're talking about that time is there were no vaccines either, and there was a lot that wasn't known about COVID at that time.
Right. I mean, now all the talk is about the vaccines, positive and negative, but really, I think it was Trump that said in June, we'll have vaccines by Christmas, and people were like, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
Because to us, I mean, you know, all of us that have been vaccinated for decades and decades, we know that it takes years to build,
Yep.
decades to
Yep.
build these vaccines, and, you know, obviously, somebody knew something, that these were coming, and I was as shocked as anyone, so.
Now, one thing that's really important with your business, and we're gonna talk about, is you need temporary foreign workers in order to do harvesting, to work in your production facility here. And that was a real challenge at the beginning of COVID. And you also had to deal with the provincial government on certain things. Tell us a bit about those experiences and how you came through those.
I'd make a joke here about a lot of medication, but I won't today. So we had in March 2020, of course, the federal government slammed the door shut on inbound flights, and without really thinking about all the workers, and not just in agriculture. I mean, there was workers from in every industry that were coming in, whether it was meat cutters and people working in processing plants, and just slamming the door shut like that was just caused a lot of issues. And people, fortunately, as I mentioned, we had about a third of our workforce, temporary foreign workers, a third of them in. But we worked, our group worked nonstop, and that's the BC Ag Council and Wally, which is the labor arm, worked nonstop, day and night. They worked, it was crazy. They were taking meetings till crazy hours of the night and early mornings to make sure that we got the doors open for temporary foreign workers. And shortly after that, the provincial government put in the quarantine, which really was significant, because what the other provinces had done, I think there was only 2 provinces that put in provincial quarantine, and I'm not even sure about that. I know for us for sure, but now you had employers scrambling, trying to provide quarantine services for large workforces, and all the protocols that go with that. Plus, you know, you had your local health department wanting to inspect it, and they had a set of protocols, and then WorkSafe BC or OSHA, depending on where you were, and it was chaos. And we were the envy of Canada by having this quarantine system, and people might have complained about it, and yes, the food was probably ghastly, but at least people got here, and they got through the quarantine and got to the farms and they were able to work. It's important that we look at it from our side, and we say, okay, we need these workers. We, you know, for Canadians to be happy and successful and to have products, we have to have these workers, but we forget that those workers have to come here. You know, that is a significant amount of their income to pay for their families and to pay for schools and vehicles and everything else in their world and their lives, and the prospect of looking at being cut off from that work was quite devastating as well. So we had a number of challenges there, and then of course, as we all know, weekly protocols were changing.
Yes.
You would wear a mask, don't wear masks, you know, you need to have hand sanitizer, you need to have barriers, you need this and that and whatever. So it was trying to keep up with that constant change and constant demand. It was quite taxing, you know, very taxing on the staff. Plus you had that level that we talked about of fear, anxiety,
Right.
you know, all those things that everyone's already feeling, and then it's this constant changing playing field.
Now, the BC government, I think, was more consistent with health information than many other governments across the country. I attribute that as a political watcher to the Premier kind of leaving Dr. Henry and Adrian Dix to have the regular press conferences and announcements. And there was a level of consistency, and of course Bonnie Henry started with be calm, be kind, and be safe, which I thought was also kind of a very interesting tagline, but a very relevant one.
Very relative, very relative, because the hysteria, and as she knows, she's been trained to deal with these types of situations, is that hysteria is the biggest enemy.
Yeah.
And I think we were very lucky to have the people in charge that we did, and not to have it politicized. I mean, now we're kind of looking at it, you know, you can, hindsight's 2020, and now you can look back and say, well, this wasn't great and that wasn't great. But, you know, for people that, except for Dr. Bonnie Henry, no one else had any experience with this.
Yes.
So the fact is that as employers and workers and consumers and the government, the fact that everyone got through this relatively unscathed, considering what it could have been, I think is really attribute to her,
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
leadership on that, for
Yeah,
sure.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think she did a good job, and she has taken lots of flack for it.
Well,
But
I think
she's-
people are just tired now, you
Yeah,
know,
they're no
I
doubt.
think, you know, a lot of people in their minds, they're, you know, COVID's over now,
Yeah.
we need to move on, and so, but that's not her job. Her job isn't to
No.
tell you when it's over, it's to tell you what to keep doing. And I think, you know, people are they're just wanting to get back to life.
Now, has COVID made your business more resilient? And the fact that we had to go through these 2 years of COVID, has it made your business more resilient?
Interesting. So we've had a number of challenges. So we had, in 2017, we had a devastating weather event, one of the worst times we've actually had on the farm. And then 2018, we had a massive fire, and we spent time rebuilding it. And then 2020, we get hit with COVID for 2 years. So it's part of I have to think of what the term is, but it's you know, it's definitely building character.
Yes.
It's definitely been building character. So we've had a number of challenges, and interesting, one of the programs that we do at GFSI, which is the Global Food Safety Initiative, and so it's looking at all of your procedures, so you're familiar with HACCP and things, so it's a food safety program, an audited program, and one part of that is what happens during a catastrophic event. So you have flooding, you have a fire, massive fire, and your buildings are burned, and so you have to do this planning. And it's interesting that, you know, it forces us to plan for an event. So people I thought we were very, very lucky with my QA manager, Tanya Preston, and my operations manager, Eldon Peters, and, you know, the GRU, is that we've all been forced to look at what would we do, what protocols would we put in place if there was a crisis. And so I hate to say it, but we've actually been prepared.
You were ready.
Yeah, we were ready.
Yeah.
And so, although it was challenging and stressful and a
Yeah.
lot of anxiety, is that, you know, you can, when you're watching one of your very expensive one of your buildings burn, and wondering what and that's only 10 days before the season started, and you're watching that thinking, you know, this kind of changes things. I better, what plan do I have to put in action now? So we've been through a lot of very stressful events, and I think I think we're definitely on the other side, hopefully, now of that, and we have a very good team, and I think we will come out of this. But it'll be interesting to see, as we spoke about before, what happens to the public psyche, and what happens to the how the public feels about going outside, about being near people again, coming into contact with them. You know, so many people, I think, still have that residual fear and anxiety.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens.
There are challenges that your business and other businesses are facing. One of them is the supply chain.
Yes.
Another one is attracting enough labor, and of course, there's many higher costs. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you're going to be dealing with those things this year and going forward?
Right. So a couple of the things that will be more expensive for us coming in. So part of our input costs will be obviously freight. You know, freight in and freight out are ridiculously expensive. And now any containers made offshore, which a lot of as an industry, a lot of our plastic clamshells and things come from offshore. We're very lucky that our boxes are made here at Crown Packaging, but there's still, you know, there's tight supply in corrugated, there's tight supply in paper. So everything, you know, it's like it's going up 20%, it's going up 30%. You know, it's, if you can even get it. So all those costs, of course, have to be passed on, and we'll see what happens with that. I mean, it's, you know, we still have to make money, right, in order to be here year over year, and you know, we'll have to pass those costs on. And it's unfortunately, you know, you've got minimum wage going up, and then you've got all these costs going up, and just, you know, and it's the consumer, and usually the lower wage consumer that's the most hit by these increases. And it's really unfortunate, but it's I think we're going to see some interesting, the next year or two, it's going to be quite interesting with costs.
Yeah, for sure. Now, were you able to establish new markets as a result of COVID, or did you just build on what your existing business was doing?
Yes, we just, I don't really think there was new markets for us. We supply a lot to Eastern Canada and into the US for fresh and frozen. But what we did see, fresh was interesting. The first year, 2020, was interesting because we didn't know if anyone was going to be buying fresh. Was anyone even going to be going to the store? And there was a lull just before we got started of demand, just really hesitant, and then all of a sudden it exploded. So when people went, when I was saying that they wanted to go fewer stops, they wanted to get more products from fewer places. So supermarkets found that people would come in and they would do a massive amount of shopping and then leave because they didn't want to come back the next week. So we did see a really good demand in fresh. Frozen, the first year, 2020, again, we were concerned what was going to happen with that. Was there anybody buying? Could we even get things across the border? And we were lucky that that our customers still had really good sales, which was good. And then now those sales have probably gone up another 30 or 40%, especially through the US.
Yeah. So
we're already sold out for anything we pack frozen this year is already sold.
Wow.
Yeah, it's nice.
So that was.
We just have to negotiate price.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the demand is there, and I think
Yeah.
the demand will probably be there for a couple of years, because again, it goes back to now we've all been through this traumatic event, and what is really important to us, and eating obviously is important to people. So.
Exactly. You have talked at other meetings about some of the challenges you face as a business even before COVID, and things like the employer health tax and some of those. I'd just like to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that, because I think many of our viewers who are also running businesses in Langley are going to identify with some of the issues that you've had to deal with.
Right. Yeah, government costs, or government directed costs, have been really a challenge. The employer health tax has been a real challenge for us. One of the reasons is that we have a good chunk of our labor force is a temporary foreign workers that come in from Mexico. So I pay the employer's health tax on it, but they're not able to access the health system unless they're here for more than 6 months. Well, that's only part of them that are. So if I sign them up and they access it, say, in 3 months, but they leave at 5 months because they're not here for the 6 months, they have to pay back all those services. So they're not willing to take that risk. So it puts us in this almost two-tiered position, and it's really frustrating. We've been lobbying the government to either take away or give us back the amount we have to pay on temporary foreign workers because they can't access services here through the BC medical system, or let them, like they are in Ontario, the moment they step off the plane, they're covered by the provincial medical system. And that was what we think, these are guest workers. These aren't migrant workers, they're not, these are guests that we're inviting into our country, coming here to work. Doing essential work for us that supports our economy and our livelihood and lifestyle. And I think it's common sense that you would provide them with medical coverage the same way you would with any other Canadian worker. So, and especially since you're paying for it. I'm already paying for it, but they're not allowed to access it.
So I know you brought this to the attention of the provincial government, and are you successful?
Yeah, short of writing it on a Canadian flag and waving it in front of them, yes, I mean, it's been numerous times, but we seem to just keep running into this, just a political standstill. Really, we need some MLAs and some cabinet ministers to really come forward and say, look, this has to get done. Because Treasury is just like, no, not today, we don't want to deal with it. So it is really important. And it's not just the 7,000 that come in with, but it's any temporary foreign worker that comes into BC for less than 6 months should be covered.
That sounds like a very
it's just, it's peanuts, really, it's a rounding error.
And it would be consistent with what Ontario is doing.
Of course, yeah, and we always have to be, in competition with Ontario for services. So. But what was the other one with the government? Minimum wage increases. We just barely get caught up, and there's another increase and another increase, and that's really pushing us to mechanize for sure.
Yeah, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, because you have been able to innovate and mechanize in a number of areas, including harvesting of blueberries and raspberries in your plant. Just tell us a little bit about what you do in those fields.
Yeah, interesting. When you look at mechanical harvesting in, say, 20 years ago of blueberries, and they'd look at them and go, oh, like, they were beaten up and they didn't look very good. And what's come around now, the engineering of these machines, is that it's actually, have had machine picked product that's nicer than hand picked product. Like, if you do it right, the machines are fully capable, and if you have the right amount of people on there and it's set, you look at this product and you think, wow, that's stunning. And we can do that with the raspberries as well. So we've changed in how we grow and what we grow here based on labor. So I can mechanically harvest raspberries and strawberries, or raspberries and blueberries, but I can't with strawberries. So instead of growing 40 acres of strawberries that I have no one to pick, I now grow 16 rotating acres. So there's only about 13 in production each year, about 12 in production each year, because that's all we can find. And that's a mix of, domestic workers, contracted laborers, and temporary foreign workers, just to harvest that small amount of acreage. And when you think of the thousands of acres BC used to grow strawberries,
Yes.
There's just no way now
It's
we
changed.
can grow that, yeah.
And you were also mentioning that here at the production facility, you've done a lot of mechanization as well.
Well, there just isn't, we're very lucky to have the staff that we do, but looking at it long-term, and especially if these labor policy changes keep happening, is that we have to find a way to put in machinery. And we do a lot of sorting now by laser and by cameras, and not by people. You just can't. If you can find the people, great. But then labor policy changes. We know we're coming, or anticipate that they're coming. That we just have to cut down on as much as we can in areas that we can.
So what do you foresee for the business this year, next year, in the future?
Well, I think if we have a decent crop this year, we've had two low crops for 2020 and 2021. It was an odd timing, that we had that. But things are looking better this year, and hopefully we have better pollination this year. And like I said, everything is pre-sold, which is nice for frozen. And I think prices will still be good, quite good for growers. And it's, but we're in a worldwide competition, right? It's a world market, so we'll see what happens. But the one thing that is working in our favor is locality, of course, because if we can't afford those crazy freight rates, we need to have everything produced close to us. And most of my clientele is just here in Washington and Oregon, which is nice. Or, we do have a lot of fresh that we sell back east, but we can hopefully hopefully get the costs back, or costs covered.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for taking some time to talk to us today, Rhonda. We wish you a very successul growing season.
Thank
Sounds
you.
like sales are already good, so that's great.
Well, fingers crossed, but it is farming, so who knows what'll happen.
And I know that our members and those watching this will be very interested in many of the issues that you've identified that your business has had to deal with.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for the time.
You're welcome.